Hello, awesome students. Let's take a moment to discuss respiration, circulation, and sensing in fish and amphibians. Fish breathe using specialized organs called gills. Fish obtain oxygen from the oxygen gas dissolved in the water around them, and they do this by pumping water through their mouths and over their gills, which then flows back out into the surrounding water. Earlier chordates had what is known as a tubular heart, which is basically one main artery that contained lots of muscle, and then there were other arteries that surrounded this muscular artery. Now, for fish and higher vertebrates, this was not a very efficient way of circulation. Since fish actually have gills that we discussed just a moment ago, and these gills contain capillaries, a stronger structure able to pump blood more efficiently was required. This ultimately led to the development of a chambered heart, as we can see here. As you can see, the fish heart has two chambers, one upper atrium and one lower ventricle. Now, before we actually get into the heart specifically, let's discuss circulation of blood in the fish heart, or the fish body rather. Circulation in fish is called single loop blood circulation. Blood is pumped from the heart to the capillaries in the gills, and then from the gills, blood passes to the rest of the body, then it returns to the heart. So it's just one big loop. Now let's actually explore this a little bit more in detail. As you can see here, oxygen poor blood, that we also refer to as deoxygenated blood, flows into the fish heart through the sinus venosus. The blood then fills the upper atrium, which contains a thin layer of muscle. From the upper atrium, blood is pumped into the lower ventricle, which actually contains a thicker layer of muscle than we find in the atrium. From the ventricle, blood then pumps to the gills, and then to the rest of the body through the conus arteriosus. Now, as you notice here, oxygen poor blood enters the heart from the body, and oxygen poor blood leaves the heart and goes to the body as well. So as we can see here in the fish heart, there is no gas exchange occurring that allows oxygen poor blood to be transformed into oxygen rich blood. Now, as you can see in the fish brain here, there are four major regions. You have the forebrain here, the midbrain here, the hindbrain here, and then the brain stem. The forebrain consists of two olfactory lobes that function in smell, two telencephalons that are equivalent to a cerebrum in higher organisms, and also functions in olfaction. So as you notice here, as I just mentioned, you don't see a cerebrum in the fish brain, but you have two telencephalons that are similar to cerebrums in other higher organisms. The midbrain consists of two optic lobes that function in sight. The hindbrain consists of a fairly large cerebellum. Now, if we recall when we were studying the human brain, the cerebellum is very important in balance, which, if you notice, this is fairly large in the fish brain, and this should not surprise you as the cerebellum does function in balance. And then the brain stem is referred to as the myelencephalon, and it functions mainly in respiration and osmoregulation. Now, for amphibians, respiration can occur one of three ways. While the organism is in the water, gas exchange can occur directly through the skin. While the organism is on land, respiration can occur one of two ways. Remember, we discussed in lesson 4.2 that the amphibian body has a mucus covering on the body. What this mucus covering does, it helps keep the body of the animal moist, and because it is moist, absorption of oxygen from the air can occur directly through the skin. Also, while on land, the organism can get oxygen from the environment through its lungs in a similar fashion that we see in humans. Now, it's not the exact same manner as human respiration, but it is similar since we do have lungs now instead of just being restricted to moisture. In the fish, we saw single loop circulation. Well, in the amphibian, we see what is known as double loop circulation. Now, before we get too deep into the amphibian heart, let's discuss this double loop circulation for just a moment. Basically, with double loop circulation, two large pulmonary veins return oxygen-rich blood from the lungs to the heart. Blood is then pumped to tissues at a much higher pressure than we saw in the fish heart. Now, the double loop circulation was a very important adaptation for amphibians because remember, amphibians are not entirely aquatic. They actually live on land as well. Therefore, more oxygen was needed to be delivered to their muscles so that they can produce more energy while on land. Now, as we can see here, the amphibian heart is divided into three regions. You have two upper atria, a left and a right one, and one lower ventricle. Now, blood enters both atria of the heart. So you have blood coming into the left atrium and blood coming into the right atrium. Oxygen-poor blood enters the right side of the heart, while oxygen-rich blood enters the left side. Now, between the two atria, there is a septum to help keep blood from mixing while they're in the atria. However, as you can see, when the blood leaves the two atria, it goes into one central ventricle. And because it goes into one ventricle, there will be some mixing of oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood. However, the tissues are arranged in the ventricle such that it helps to prevent complete mixing of oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood. Now, oxygen-rich blood tends to stay on the side of the heart where blood is pumped to the body, and oxygen-poor blood tends to stay on the side where blood is actually pumped to the lungs. Now, as we just mentioned, it is essential for oxygen-rich blood to be circulated throughout the amphibian's body because remember, as they are moving around on land, they actually need more energy for their muscles, and remember, energy is produced by way of oxygen. Now, the last structure that we're going to discuss is the amphibian brain. As we can see here, the amphibian brain is more highly developed than the fish brain. Now, in the amphibian brain, you actually see the presence of a cerebral area, and it processes sensory input in terms of smell in the olfactory area and sight in the optic area. And then there's actually a medulla or medulla, depending on who's pronouncing it, oblongata, that functions with the heartbeat and respiration. And then we also see a pineal gland here on the dorsal surface of the amphibian brain. Well, that ends our discussion of respiration, circulation, and sensing in the fish and the amphibian. And I look forward to seeing you in class very soon.